Hello, global citizens. It is great to have you joining us. We are at UN TV for the next 45 minutes. My name is Femi OK. I am digitally curious about the conversation we're about to have about digital cooperation. Hashtag digital cooperation. If you're on Twitter, if you're online, use that. We will try and curate your comments, get them into this conversation with the Secretary-General of the United Nations, António Guterres. What kind of digital citizen are you, Secretary-General?
Well, I have to say that after reading the report that was produced by our high-level panel on digital cooperation, that I believe has gathered the most diverse, the most competent and the most committed group of people that the UN has any time able to gather. After reading the report, I am enthusiastic about the enormous potential of the digital era. But I'm also enthusiastic about the capacity for us to bring people together, governments, the academia, businesses, the civil society, in order to address the risks and threats that also exist.
Well, nice job, co-chairs of that high-level panel on digital cooperation. They are both with us today. Melinda Gates is co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Good to have you here, Melinda. What kind of digital citizen are you?
Well, I'd like to say I'm digitally literate, but my 16-year-old daughter might say I'm not as literate as I think I am.
Because why?
Because the future is being created literally every day, and it's changing. It's changing so fast, we can't even predict where digital is going to take us 30 years from now.
Right.
My background is computer science and economics, and at the time I worked at Microsoft in the late 1980s. I worked there for 9 years. We were not predicting a phone in our pockets with the digital computing power we have now. And yet they're so important in most of our lives, we can't imagine. We lose our phones, we think, oh my gosh, how am I going to survive?
Exactly.
So I would say I'd like to think I'm digitally literate, but maybe I'm actually digitally illiterate.
Oh my goodness, no hope for the rest of us. And Jack Ma, the Executive Chairman of the Alibaba Group, also co-chair on this high-level panel on digital cooperation. What kind of digital citizen are you, Jack?
Yeah, after being working at the internet industry for 25 years, I'm a non-tech guy. Up to now, using computer, I still can. The only thing I use send, receive emails.
I do not believe that.
Because I think I'm a beginner of the digital period. I think I get more and more people like me in this world. 99% of the people in the world that worry about technology, worry about this area, and after going through for 25 years. I think we are all beginners.
So the Secretary-General gave you both a challenge and also the people on the panel a challenge, which was how do we look at digital technology, what it can do for us, and also make it inclusive and also safe. That was the premise of why you got together and then you headed up this panel. When you were doing that, Melinda and Jack, how did you go about it?
Well, we had consultation from many people, even outside the panel, and then several panel discussions and meetings that came together where we talked about the disparate points of view. We talked about the incredible opportunities that technology gives us in the future to create the world that we want, a more just and humane world. And we also talked about some of the downsides. And we started to say, okay, what needs to be done so that we create the world of the future that we want? And I think at the end of the day, we realized that you have to have many diverse points of view and people at the table so that we are creating the future that we can imagine as far as we can see it for our society. But we don't yet have the right governance structure or institutions to really make sure that we use the most of that technology.
Jack, what did you come to the table thinking? What are you going to try and do? You had 9 months to get this done.
Yeah, at first I think it's a very, very important task. It's a great honor to get involved because this digital period, which we like or don't like, next to 30, 50 years, the human beings will be on the digital area. So, but great thing is we have a great panel and people from different academic, business, government, and we start to discuss, every area have a different thing. Countries like China, countries like Europe, USA, and countries in Europe, they worry a lot. In Africa, they don't worry about anything, just want to grasp it. So we talk to a lot of people, we listen to them, we think the more disagree we have, the more I think it's important that we should not worry about the future. Nobody is the expert of future. We should learn, we should embrace it, and we should change our mentality to embrace this revolution and have the confidence in ourselves. There's problems, there are good things, how we can solve the problems, how we can work in together and to face this challenge. So I think it's a great fun to work in the 9 months.
I'm going to go to a tweet, Melinda, that you shared quite recently, because digital inclusion is so important, that we still have a digital divide around the world. And you were talking about digital technology to close gender gaps. Women must be a part of the building and designing of it. What a phenomenal conversation you had. And you were at a huge conference last week called Women Deliver, where women from around the world were looking at how are they part of sharing equality and power around the world. And obviously, being digitally literate is part of that. You really hone in on women.
Yes. So women need to not only be digitally literate so they can take advantage of mobile money or being able to save, if they're in a remote location, let's say in Malawi, be able to save $1 a day, $2 a day. It makes an enormous difference, we know, on the health and the well-being and the education of the family if a woman can take advantage of those services. And we see those services now in many, many countries around the world. But in addition, women need to have a seat at the table as the creators of society. So one of the things that I talked about at this conference last week was that if you look around the world, women get less than 6% of all venture capital funding to start new businesses, to start new technology businesses. And yet we know women have fabulous ideas for how to solve some of the problems of the future. So women need to have access to that capital and to have a seat at the table to create the future that we want to create.
Jack, got a tweet in here from the CWA Federation. In what way can digital growth of work learn from the cooperative model, or how can we envision a cooperative platform in the gig economy? So how can the digital technology help us in terms of business? You've used it beautifully in your work.
Yeah, I think the most important element of the value of this digital period is inclusiveness. It helps women, helps the small business, help developing countries. Because I absolutely agree with Melinda talking. For my site, we have over 10 million small business selling on our site. Normally, they can only sell things to their own village or their city. Today, they sell all across China, all across Asia and the world. And 50% of the successful power sellers are women. Because nobody really cares about you're a woman or man, you're well-educated, nice. As long as your product's good, your service, then women can do much better jobs on the internet, because it's not this area is not the area of competition of muscles. Oh, it's a competition of heart, brain, and wisdoms. Right. So I think the small business in the IT period, people only using when you have the money, you have the technology, you have all the resources, you can do things. Today, small business can using internet. They can compete anywhere with anybody. So we believe at the digital period, small is beautiful and small is powerful.
When I was last in Africa, one of the things that I saw that kind of blew me away about how people were using the people who had smartphones, but even the people who had normal plastic phone, they're using WhatsApp in profound ways to go find piecemeal work or to sell their goods and services, even without a company being involved. So people are taking advantage of this, but as Jack says, we have to make sure that everybody has access to the digital rails.
Yeah.
Secretary General, what are you most concerned about in terms of inclusion so that the whole world can benefit from digital technology?
Well, 20 years ago I was in government, and we had a naive optimism about globalization. We thought that globalization would not only generate an enormous wealth, which it did, but that would trickle down and would benefit everybody, and it's not true. Inequalities have grown, as we know. And when I look at the Agenda 2030, our objective to leave no one behind, to have a fair globalization, there is only one way to do it, which is to use as much as we can the digital technologies to a quantum leap in relation to global development and to a fair development. But for that, there is a major threat that we need to overcome. Half of the world population is still offline. So the first priority is to make sure that everybody is online, that everybody has the capacity to benefit from the digital era in which we are entering. And this requires a huge commitment of governments, a huge commitment of the business community, of societies, but it is an absolute must. We need to have a globalization for all. We need to be able not to leave people behind, because if not, the conflicts will inevitably grow, the mistrust will inevitably grow. And the digital platforms enable us to reach everybody. So let's invest to make sure it happens.
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I heard that, I couldn't agree with more, because in Rwanda, can you imagine a farmer in Rwanda, Africa, can use a mobile phone to sell coffee across Africa to China to Southeast Asia. And I also think that today, if we're not connect any country, if you don't let your people connect to the internet, it's worse than last century. Don't let them connect to the electricity, because it's going to change a lot of things. We should not leave our people, leave them in the last century. The digital period is the step from now. It's just the beginning. And don't worry too much about that. And the other thing is that we think that especially globalization is nothing wrong. But globalization is not inclusive enough. In the older technology, you cannot help those small business, young people that can global sell, global buy, global deliver, global pay. Today, internet is enabling lots of small business and young people, women doing that. So I think let's grasp it. Let's make any efforts to make sure our people, our young people, our women that can use in that.
I'm just going to let people know who are just joining the conversation. We're having a conversation about digital cooperation. That's the hashtag digital cooperation. It's about a high-level UN panel that have been working for the last 9 months. They put out their report. It is fresh online right now. If you want to see what they've been doing, go to digitalcooperation.org. You will see all the work they've been doing over the last 9 months. You can see the report. You can look at that and multitask while you're joining us here live on UN TV. Anthony has a little bit of pushback here. He posts, the internet is ultra inclusive. There should be a huge push to get every single person on the planet easy access. Because he doesn't think that there's a gender bias there. He thinks that everybody could be online. How did you discuss this at the high level panel? How did you discuss getting more people digital access?
So Anthony's absolutely right. The internet should be for everybody, but today it's not. Women are 40% less likely around the world to have access to the internet. And so we have to look at special programming for women. If a woman is not comfortable, she's not yet digitally literate, how do you bring her along so that she can understand how to use that phone? How do we make it simple for her? How do we also say to men in a village, it's all right for a woman to have a phone. You're not going to be putting her in harm's way. You're actually going to be helping with her safety. So we do have some cultural issues to overcome. And one of the reasons I'm so glad that the SG had this panel come together is we need to look at it as a world and say we need to be investing in human capital and infrastructure. But infrastructure today is not just roads and water and electricity. Those things are absolutely important. We still need to push those. But it also means access to information. Because say a female farmer has a crop that she's raised, which most women on the continent of Africa are farmers. She's raised a crop. If she knows the market price at market for her crop, she doesn't get taken by the middleman who takes her crop to market. She says, no, it's $20 a bushel for my maize. You must have gotten $20, not $10. So information is power, but we need to get it out there equally in everybody's hands.
Jack, I'm still thinking about, Melinda raised really good questions. How? We don't have to have the answers right now, but we do need to work towards the answers. How do you do that, Melinda? You raised that question about, well, how do you get that phone in the hands of rural women? Actually, rural communities all over the world are struggling with digital access. Did you get to the how, or did you just say this is an issue that we have to work on?
I think this report is just the beginning. We tell people how important it is. And the second is that I've been trying a testing in China that tried convincing a poor province, Guizhou province. They 4 years ago they think, well, we have to invest in the infrastructure. So infrastructure means roads. But I think road is important, but the infrastructure of the internet access, internet connection is so important. And that is like a bottom 10 or bottom 5 less developed province in China. Today, they are the top 10 provinces in China. People, all the poor people, farmers, young people, and women, they start connecting internet. They're using internet and the mobile phone, as you said. They're looking for the market, they're looking for opportunity, looking for jobs. So that proves that government should pay extreme attention that if you want your province, your city to be developed, do anything you can to let your people connect to the internet, access it. And also the other thing is education. because education is so important. Today, the education system, the way we teach, the content that we teach are all the things in the past 200 years for industry. We teach our kids to memorize, to calculate faster. But past 20 years, we are making people like a machine. And next 20 years, we'll make a machine like a people. So we have to change.
Machine like people, so could they replace us?
Yeah, in the past 20, 30 years, we're like a...
Well, they are replacing us.
Yeah, we are
certain
making
jobs.
people
Yeah.
like a machine.
Yeah,
Next 30, 40 years,
Yeah.
we will make machine like a people. So how can we change the education system to making sure our kids are able to compete with the computers, robots, artificial intelligence, not only using brain but using heart, to be more creative, innovative, constructive. This is what we think.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. Do you have even a hint of an answer to that?
No, yeah, I think we're testing. I've decided to put another 15 years on the education and try to making sure our kids are ready to be able to face the challenge
Melinda,
instead of worry.
I have been stalking you, Melinda, on Twitter. It's called Research. What kind of technology, Melinda Gates says, excites me most? The kind that saves lives. Read on to see how countries like Uganda have used technology for positive disruption. So here we're looking at health and education, technology helping in health and education. I know the SDG is really keen about that because with this global development agenda that we have, the SDGs, knowing how technology can help get us to 2030 is going to be very helpful.
Definitely.
You're focusing on that.
We're focusing on that as a world. We have to focus on that because, again, if you take a woman or a man, when they have that digital information on their phone, I mean, the phone gives us an opportunity we've never had in the past. If you look back 10 years ago, we didn't have this opportunity. And I can be out in a remote rural village, you can be in Botswana, and a cell phone rings, even where there's no running water. So when a woman, I'll use that example, can see on her phone, the vaccines are available at the clinic. Today's the day I should walk with my kids. Today's the day that contraceptives are available at the clinic. Today's the day I should go in. A woman, what she mostly has in the developing world is her unpaid labor. But she doesn't want to use it to go into clinic if the vaccines aren't there. And yet she knows that life-saving vaccine will save her children's life. So that information is vitally and critical to her. It's critical to her in terms of her kids' safety, knowing if they go out where they are. It's critical in terms of the kids' education. As Jack says, we're just at the dawn, honestly, of what technology is going to do in education in terms of curriculum, in terms of what kids can learn no matter where they live, and then information about where jobs are, where markets are. So it will touch and can touch all of these things and will augment our lives in ways that could change it, make these remote places more accessible to everybody.
Secretary General, so it's by no accident that you called this panel Digital Cooperation. You wanted people from all around the world, different stakeholders, academics, private businesses. You wanted citizens also to be involved in this because you wanted to use digital technology for good.
Yes, and one of the fantastic things about this panel is that not only they have shown how we can maximize the use of this huge potential, but also they have addressed the problems of the threats and the risks that exist. I mean, I came from Christchurch, and we know the internet can be used on a terrible way. But the point is that we need to approach it in a way that is also cooperative. We cannot do it as in the past, in which an international convention was established after a discussion that would take years. Finally, all countries would come together, and then they would take 2 or 3 years to ratify, to regulate the internet. This would be a disaster. We need forms of cooperation. We need forms of governance based on cooperation. We need limited and smart regulation. And this can only be done bringing together all stakeholders, governments, businesses, the academia, the civil society, which means that the multilateralism of the future will be different. We need multilateral approaches to the challenges we have today, be it climate change, be it technology. But that multilateralism needs to be inclusive. Needs to be governments, academia, civil society, businesses, because only cooperating together we will be able to limit the threats that exist and the risks that exist and to maximize the potential, the positive potential to make the digital era a era of progress and justice for the whole world.
Jack, I hear the Secretary General, and this is an amazing vision for the future, but reality is, why would you share your tech information with anybody else? Why would you, as a private company, help anybody else? The Bill Melinda Gates Foundation, that's what they do. But other organizations and other stakeholders, they may not want to work together.
Well, from the IT technology to DT technology, there's a big difference. IT is make yourself stronger, and DT is empower others. If you want to be successful in the DT period, is to empower. For what Alibaba achieved, why we're so excited about what we're doing, the past 25 years, we've been trying our best to empower small business women, developing, make them good. If they're good, we're good. So this is the difference between IT and DT, from yourself to empower the others. Second, I think tech should be good, because this technology is going to so powerful that if you think, don't be evil. Don't be evil is just the bottom line, should not be the goal. Every technology company should do good things. If you only think about do good things, you will have more creative people joining you, and your company will be more profitable. And I think it's the create jobs, security, privacy things. These are not the problems the government should worry. These are the things the private sector should worry about too. Because
So
if you
the government shouldn't worry about.
no, not only government worry about, should also be worried by business like us, private sectors. Because only you think about the jobs, only you think about inclusive, only you think about the secure and privacy, your company will be sustainable, will be welcome in this century. Otherwise, you'll be out.
Let me put this to you, Jack and Melinda, because people do worry about safety online and in the digital space. So this is from Aro Lasun in Nigeria. We can ensure safety only when the motives behind the design of these technologies are right, unfortunately falling in the hands of the right user. So that suggests that maybe they could fall in the hands of the wrong user. Should we be reassuring digital citizens, or should we be saying we need to be wary?
We need to be worried, but don't worry too much, because this is what my experience. Alibaba had got hacking attacks like every day, 300 million attacks per day. But I think, well, this is an experience. You have to learn, you have to do it. And when people watch too much movie and TVs about private security, we may not have solutions today, but we will have a solution tomorrow. And I think, professional internet companies, they do have the technology. If we pay attention to it, if we worry, if we concern it, we put resources in it, there is a solution. But if we worry too much, just like, tomorrow is gonna have the earth is earthquake, you can do nothing. So we should be positive.
I think of this a bit like transportation. At one point in our history, human beings walked across the plains and on the planet. Then we rode horses and other means of transportation. Then we built rail systems, we built shipping systems, we built cars. Now we fly across the world. You can go essentially from Nairobi through Southeast Asia to United States to London. And at a 99% rate, human beings can do that travel in a safe way. Now, your luggage might arrive at a 97% rate, and you might not quite like your meal on every flight that you get. But we have regulated in such a way that the private sector is very robust, and yet there's certain regulations for safety of airspace and safety of passengers. And there is some hassle for passengers. I do have to stand in line and have my luggage checked, but I'm willing to do that at the airport because I can arrive safely. That is how I think we need to think about technology in the future, the digital age. How do we come together, civil society, private sector, government, to say, what are the needed guardrails on this technology, but that let the industry also flourish?
I love
think
that.
if I may,
Yes, Secretary General.
there are problems that do not come from the technology.
Yeah.
Hate speech, we always had hate speech. The technology amplifies hate speech, but we need to fight hate speech as such, which means it's not enough to regulate technologies. We need to have programs for our societies, for our communities, in which we address the evils of those societies and those communities by themselves. Yes. Because we won't solve the problem only dealing with technology. We need to solve the problem politically, socially. We need to have inclusive societies. We need to have societies in which people understand diversity is a richness, not a threat, in which there is an investment in social cohesion. So let's not ask the technology to solve our political problems. Let's solve our political problems, and let's act in a way that the technology becomes a plus and not a minus in that action. But sometimes one looks only at the technology, we should look at what we are talking about. And what we are talking about is to fight those elements that undermine the cohesion of our societies.
Melinda, I love your analogy about flying, but some of the best regulations come after disasters.
Yes.
So are we going to have disasters in the digital world? In fact, yes. The answer is yes. I'm answering my own question.
We've had some
disasters.
and we need to
And now we're
learn
trying to
from
play
those
catch up.
disasters.
Yeah.
So we've had some disasters in the airline industry, and we put more safeguards in. We put a little bit more security. It got locked down more in airports in the last 10 years, right? So there have to be some safety regulations around this, but we are human beings. We learn from every experience. And I agree, if you have an inclusive society, at the 98% level, things are going to be okay. But yes, you're going to have some radicals who use any type of technology, an airplane, a digital tool. We need safeguards against that. But by and large, you want a thriving industry that can move, that we can all move humanity forward.
Jack, you talked about a number of cyber attacks on Alibaba, so you must have some very good security within Alibaba, or you're getting a lot of practice there. Safeguards then must be on your mind all of the time. Can you share any of them with us?
Yeah, I think since we had this business, especially a lot of e-commerce and transaction financing, so when you have a lot of money and when you have a lot of transactions, a lot of people coming, attacking you. So we started this kind of things. We find one thing very artificial intelligence. We did not call it artificial intelligence. We just call Alibaba intelligence. That was 10, 15 years ago. We found so many people try to steal money on the internet. And we find one philosophy, the thing is that when you love somebody, you may not have logic. But when you hate somebody, there's a logic behind it. So if you have logic behind it, machine can do better. So we teach our machine how to arrest, how to find out all the IP breaches and counterfeit and money stealing, and the machine doing perfect jobs. Now we are teaching machines that these bad actions, when they come out, the machine know how to do that. So I think we've been making a lot of mistakes, but we're putting a lot of resources. We got more and more confidence. As a company, we are very confident. As a company, we don't want the government to have a lot of policies, but at the government, they always want to make regulation and policy to control it. But we think at the smart time, we need smart policies. Government and private sector, academics should working together, make smart, because nobody is expert of future. We have to learn from mistakes. We move forward, and then we make policies which, because as I said, 25 years ago, we discussed a lot of the risk and worries. But all these things, nothing happened. But all these things we never worry about, it happens. So this is the human being is smart enough. We have to learn. We have to trust our own people.
Let me get the politicians or the former politicians' perspective from that. So business says we don't need too many regulations. As a former Prime Minister, how do you see that? How do you see your duty to look after your... Yeah.
And there are proposals for governance in the report.
Yeah.
I think we need regulation, but it should be limited and smart.
Okay.
And it should evolve, because things move very quickly. And the way to do it is to bring all stakeholders in defining it and implementing it. So we need the governments, we need the companies, the academia to be able to have the adequate regulation that is evolving with time and accompanies the problems that we face. Because if we try to do it as we have done it 20 or 30 years ago, we will be totally unable to follow the developments. And then there is one thing, we need to put people in the center of everything. Yes. And we can use new technologies to promote human rights. You can use new technologies to promote equality. But for that, you need always to have a people-centered approach. And that people-centered approach is not only a government responsibility. We see it more and more as a society responsibility. And we see more and more corporate social responsibility in businesses, and we see more and more the civil society very active in making sure that the people's interests, the human rights, are protected when we deal with new technologies.
I like that you said people-centered approach. One of the things that the digitalcooperation.org did was to talk to people. They surveyed people and they shared some of their positive experiences on the internet. So a young lady from India says that the internet has changed her life because she can email, she can video people. A young man from Brazil says technology that changed his life was meant that he could be connected, cross-platform messaging in Malaysia, and so on and so on. So very positive feedback here from people who have access to the internet. I was looking at a picture of the panel meeting, the high-level panel meeting, and there are the pose pictures, and then there are the candid pictures. And as the final report was being written, there were a couple of hands in, heads in hands, furrowed brows. And I also noticed two whiteboards. One said headlines, and one said exciting. What ended up on the exciting board for this report?
I think on the exciting board ended up, how do you do this human-centered design? How do you make it inclusive so that it really changes everybody's life? Like the fact that we can imagine a future in 2030 where if people are digitally connected, they can use it in so many ways. Again, I keep going back to an example of a woman. So many women who are marginalized and pushed to the edges of society, who are out in remote places, when they have access to a digital phone, they can reach for help. They will tell you, saving $1 a day or $2 a day, they have power in their family. If they're in India, their mother-in-law sees them differently. They'll tell you, my young son sees me differently when I've saved a few dollars a day and I can buy him a bicycle. When there's a health event, I don't have to negotiate with my husband. I have the fees. So digital gives people power, and those were some of the things that we were excited about, is that inclusion of digital. That made us excited as a panel.
Yeah. I think it's so inclusive. I remember years ago I went to Peru. There was a demonstration against the free trade, and I was there. People say, hey, Jack, you know, you're from China, you're a big country with a lot of trade to Peru. They against me. And then suddenly a young man stood up. He grabbed the microphone. He said, everybody, hey, I'm using Alibaba, I'm using internet, selling my product. I never thought in my life I could sell my products cross from Peru to Malaysia through the internet, and I'm making money on that. And also, you know, today, because of the internet, a lot of companies can borrow money. They never think they can borrow money from a banks, but they can borrow money in 3 minutes, 1 second, the money going to the account. All these
Jack, I
things
need to write this down. I can borrow money in 3 minutes.
Yeah, 3-1.
People want to know
we
this.
call in China, we're
Yes.
using internet code 310. 3 minutes you apply, 1 second money in your account, 0 people touch.
Extraordinary.
You can
Yeah.
borrow $1, you can borrow 1 minute. So this is all the technology that is changing the world. That's why young people never worry. We find the young people don't worry, Africa don't worry, but European worry. Because they think, I want to keep yesterday. It's impossible to keep yesterday. Young people, they don't have yesterday, they want to have a future. Africa want to have a future. So this is what we see, its complexity is that Europe, America, China, Africa, and Latin America. We have a different group and experts on the panel. I think we had a privilege to discuss in the past 9 months. We hope the whole world, every country, everybody should discuss, look into it. Because when you worry because you don't know things, when you discuss, when you see it through, when we read this report, I think people get eased. And you don't have a solution, the other people have solutions. You don't have the ways to do it, the other people have. So by cooperation, government, private, and academia, all the people, we human beings should have a full confidence that this is a great opportunity for everybody.
2 examples, to Jack's point exactly. People who could never get credit before, who couldn't go to a bank, they didn't have enough credit to take out a loan, simply by looking at how they have been using their data on their mobile phone, what actions they've been taking, you can start to see if they're a reliable customer. And so all of a sudden, credit is open to them. We've met drivers in Southeast Asia, women who have no birth certificate, no legal means, but driving companies that are pulling them in are saying, we want to have those women as drivers and as small business owners, so they will go help them fill out and get their birth certificate and their legal documents and pull them into the formal sector. Lastly, you see whole governments like India starting to run their kerosene payments through this mobile platform. It takes graft out of the system, and all of a sudden that woman or man actually has kerosene when the cold winter months come in the Himalayas. That's the exciting part about technology being inclusive. That I agree with you, many people in these various places that aren't the capitals of the world see the change, palpable change it's having in their lives.
You are obviously bringing the excitement, the enthusiasm of what you got from this report looking at digital cooperation. I know people will be following this conversation but also quite fearfully. And you picked up on this, Jack. So there are two things. One is mega companies like Microsoft, so they're going to be concerned about that, and companies that are that big. And the other one is China. So let's look at the big digital companies first of all, Melinda. Is there a sense of people having to be reassured about they're there to do good? I'm not specifically saying Microsoft, but they're worried, and these sort of disasters and ability to protect your own information, that has been a big conversation that's come up over the last couple of years, and people are concerned about that.
And I think concerned for good reason. We all have a right to our privacy and to our data. And I think what you're seeing is because that conversation has come forward and you're seeing it in the headlines, we need to always be careful about the news headlines. They're there to grab attention. They're there to play on our fears, right? But what you're seeing is the tech sector come together. I'll take one example, like artificial intelligence. And they are working together now to say, what are the standards we want to use for AI? What's the transparency we want to have for AI? And they're starting to self-govern. You saw the same thing happen in past technologies when past technologies came out too. Regulations are self-governing around, should we move from VHS to CD-ROM? There were lots of different standards, and the industry came together. So when I see industry moving forward together, we had several of the players from industry on our panel, that's when I start to know, hey, they're going to solve some of these problems, and so it will take just smart, right-sized regulation around that.
I think that things are changing. If we would discuss this 5 years ago, companies would be very reticent to enter into this discussion and say we want full freedom. Now, it is clear that in any moment in history, when you have too much power, you can abuse that power. And so it is obvious that we need to move into a way in which power is better distributed, in which there is not too much concentration of power. And what I believe now the private sector is understanding is that it is much better to have a system that is more transparent, more open, and in which people renounce to that potential abuse of power, but with the condition that the system also works in an harmonious way to provide the maximum service to everybody. I think companies are now much more open to cooperate with the public sector, to cooperate with the civil society, to find ways to avoid that the abuse of power that always comes with concentration becomes also a nuisance to themselves. And so I'm optimistic about this possibility of a inclusive multilateralism, of the potential of dialogue and cooperation between the different key actors. 5 or 10 years ago, I would say it will not happen. Now, I must say, I think conditions are being created for effective smart regulation with the cooperation of everybody to avoid the risks that they really exist, but also never to forget to maximize the use of the potential with the condition, and we have discussed all these examples, with the condition that everybody can benefit. And let's not forget, half of the world population is still offline, and this is a major objective for all of us.
Yeah. And I think big companies in this center, big means not, does not mean size, big means responsibility. When you grow big, but if you do not pay attention to privacy, you do not pay attention to data security, if you do not pay attention to human rights, if you do not pay attention to the interest of the society, you'd go disappear also very quickly. So I think that at the digital period, companies actually, everybody cannot sleep well. For us, we worry about every day, whether I enable my small business powerful enough, they can survive next future. So I think that big companies in this century means big responsibility. The bigger you are, the big problem you have, the big responsibility you have. So that's the thing.
Yeah, and Jack, I mean, I did put Melinda on the spot just a little bit because I asked about big companies like Microsoft, but there are also countries that have a very different view on governance, and China has a very specific view on governing the internet and the digital space, but it's also doing fantastic work in that digital space. So it's almost like there's tension between that, between how advanced China is in the digital space and then how accepting people are of that. What's your take on that?
Well, the policy always follow behind the development of the technology, right? So our job as in the past 20 years in Alibaba as a CEO, my job is Chief Education Officer. I try to educate customers. Luckily, I'm not a technical guy. I don't have to work on. I do the talk, they do the work. So I talk to the government officer, try to convince them, because it's so new to any government. So as a person in the internet, I have to let every government officers, let them know what this technology is. Don't worry, what to worry, what not to worry. And I speak to the SMEs, try to making sure they are moving them on the internet. This is the way it's the cooperation between government, small business, and technology companies, and even universities that change the way of thinking. That is the whole way moving was. So what I think, I got more confidence, and we got more confidence, because if China can make this thing happen, why not the other countries? Right? We totally changed China and the internet circumstance in the past 20 years. We think in Africa could be much easier, because you see in Africa so many young people, mobile phones. We never had this kind of mobile 20 years ago. Today, mobile phone is much more powerful than any PC in 20 years ago. So it's the opportunity. And government and private sectors, academia, technology companies, if we all believe in the future, if we working together closely, if we make smart policies, if we think empower the others, I think it's good for everybody.
Secretary General, you gave the high-level panel on digital cooperation an assignment. Melinda and Jack were heading up that assignment. How do you think they did?
Well, the result is fantastic. I mean, I have here the report, and this was a very special group, because it was a group of people coming from government, coming from businesses, coming from technology companies, coming from the civil society, human rights organizations, and a group of very intelligent people that managed to be an intelligent group. Sometimes you have groups of very intelligent people and the group becomes very stupid because of that. But this was a group of very intelligent people that produced a very intelligent report. And this report will be a fantastic instrument, not to immediately be applied in a number of laws or regulations or whatever, but to start a very serious discussion worldwide involving everybody, how we can transform the digital era in an era for good for everybody. And I think that the ideas that are here, the proposals that are here, in all aspects, mobilizing capacities, mobilizing potential, finding the smart regulations that are necessary, taking profit of the diversity that exists in the world, the ideas that are in this report can be an excellent base for a discussion. We will start this discussion today with member states. We hope the whole world will be discussing online, because we will be celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations next year. I want it to be the launch pad of a serious discussion on the future of multilateralism, to be relevant, because only what is relevant exists and prevails. And for multilateralism to be relevant, multilateralism has to be able to deal with the digital era in an effective, positive way.
So, Melinda Gates, Jack Ma, it sounds like you scored an A+. Thank you very much for bringing this conversation. Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you as well. Where can you find this very positive, enthusiastic report about digital cooperation? digitalcooperation.org. That report is available right now. Thank you for watching. Take care, everybody.